like most of the Shang-Chi movie, but that last act doesn't work for me. Shang-Chi has a rough relationship with his father, a crime lord. Long story short, Marvel no longer has the rights to. But as he's a hero, he resists his father's desire to be at his side in his criminal empire. But what if I told you he didn't have to resist his father's influence? What if I told you, in my version, Shang-Chi joins his father's cartel? We're ready for heroes who aren't squeaky clean. Villain protagonists like Loki and the Suicide Squad. Grayish characters like the cannibalistic Venom and Morbius, who's cool with teaming up with a guy who threatened to murder a child. We're ready, but often the execution leaves a lot to be desired. But what if we had a character who, from the outsider's POV, looks like a villain, but we're with him on his, let's not call it a hero's journey for obvious reasons, but his journey, so we know why he's doing what he's doing, but everyone else is concerned. A lot of A-tier characters, they're locked in what audiences will expect from them, but the less known characters are afforded more freedom of what they can do. What about the sister? She takes over the father's organization by the end. I hope she's not watching, but she was the weak link in the movie for me. I didn't think her lines were delivered very well, which at the time I first watched this, I wasn't sure if it was bad acting or bad directing, but since everyone else is acting circles around her, I'm not trying to be mean, and since this was literally her first acting job, I'd say it's the fault of Ming'er Zhang. I like the ideas behind her relationship with Shang. Two kids, father wants one of them to join him, but the kid doesn't want it, and the other kid wants it, but the father wants nothing to do with her. There's some juicy stuff there, but a lot of it gets sidelined for most of the movie, since we're also juggling father's inability to move on from his wife's death, accidentally summoning a demon, Shang's issues with his dad, his acceptance of his duties as the holder of the rings, so something was bound to fall to the wayside. I'd save the sister for the sequel. Shang can tell Awkwafina he had a sister when he was young, but he hasn't seen her in a long time, so it doesn't come out of nowhere when she shows up later on. My alternative version of this story. Shang's in LA, minding his own biz. He gets attacked not because he has part of a magic pendant, but his father wants him back home. In my version, Shang's dad is not the Mandarin. I get why they did it. In the 1970s, his dad was Fu Manchu, who Marvel doesn't have the rights to. So they tried the next best thing, using another Asian crime lord with roots in the not okay Yellow Peril era. But the Mandarin was already used in Iron Man 3. A lot of people hated the Mandarin twist in Iron Man 3. I was not one of them. The Mandarin wasn't exactly portrayed well in his earliest appearances, and even when you get into the less racist portrayals, I've never seen much appeal in the character. So for me, saying, here's the Mandarin, just kidding, it's this other guy using the Mandarin as a distraction so people don't look at what he's doing, I thought that was great. It seems like when they first said, let's do a Shang-Chi movie, one of their big goals was to backtrack on one of the most interesting parts of Iron Man 3. Nuh-uh, there really is a Mandarin. He was just hanging out over here totally okay with Guy Pearce and Ben Kingsley dragging his name through the mud. Then he kidnapped Ben Kingsley and decided to let him live for some reason, even though he's supposed to be a terrifying crime lord, so he probably wouldn't let Ben Kingsley live. Instead of the Mandarin, I'd use the Yellow Claw. Yes, he was also portrayed not very well. We won't use the name Yellow Claw. His real name in the comics is Plan Chu, so use that. Say Shang changed his name a little to try to escape his father's notice. He's a similar archetype to Fu Manchu and the Mandarin, but you're not having to run in circles to free him up from established continuity. Also, he's got some superpowers in the comics that could come from the rings, but the rings are from the Mandarin. In the comics, he's the one who uses them. Yes, but in the comics, Shang-Chi doesn't use rings. He doesn't have superpowers. He's just a normal martial arts guy, and the rings are actual rings, not floating bracelets. So by this point, we're so far removed from what the comics did and didn't do, it would be okay if we use a different crime lord. People get hurt in this attack. The feds investigate because attack on foreign soil, and who's leading the investigation? Agent Wu. This takes place right before WandaVision. Maybe Wu's investigation gets him noticed by the higher-ups, and he gets bigger and better assignments like Westview. I like Randall Park, but I feel bad for what he's been given to do in this universe. I didn't mind him being the comic relief in Ant-Man 2. They had to remind us the Sokovia Accords were still a thing, but he's just there for us to laugh at. In WandaVision, he's not comic relief, but also I can't remember anything he actually does in that show. You could remove him and you wouldn't notice a difference in the plot. This would be my way of rehabilitating the character a little. He wouldn't have a huge part, but he's been trying to bust Plan Chu's criminal operations for a while. In the comics, Agent Wu was the Yellow Claw's adversary, so we'll sort of imply that here. While Wu questions Shang and Awkwafina, he kinda lets it slip he knows who Shang is, but he's pretty sure Shang didn't have anything to do with this attack, so he's free to go. This prompts Awkwafina to pester Shang. What was that about? He tells her he's a crime prince. She encourages his instinct to find his father and put a stop to him, so more people don't get hurt. It isn't just this attack on the bus that slaps Shang in the face, but hearing Agent Wu talk about all the stuff stuff connected to his dad makes Shang realize he's had his head buried in the sand too long. Instead of Shang's sister having the Fight Club, it's an old acquaintance from childhood. This guy worked for his dad and runs one of the lower level operations for making some side cash. He was mostly there to help guide Shang into the position his dad wanted him to be in as an adult. Shang comes not to look for a magic pendant, but to send a message to his father. I'm done hiding. Now I'm going to tear down the 10 rings. Before Shang and Awkwafina show up to kick names and take butt, they give an anonymous call to Agent Wu and say it's about to go down at the Fight Club. He'll get the credit for nabbing a lot of at-large criminals who fought Shang, which leads to his promotion we see in WandaVision, though we could still keep him open for appearances in the Shang-Chi sequel. Shang doesn't have a plan. He's really good at martial arts, like against almost any non-superhuman, he would definitely win, but this Fight Club has all kinds of superhumans. Remember in my video suggesting how to incorporate mutants into the MCU? We would be seeing mutants this early after Endgame. Shang's dad shows up and kidnaps him and Awkwafina. I've removed the magic pendants dad needs to get into the hidden fantasy world, imprisoning the dragon. My problem was the third act being so removed from the rest of Earth. I like how grounded and also otherworldly the first two acts felt. The fight scenes all took place in real locations, or if there's not a metahuman fight club somewhere in China, it at least felt like a real location. But Act 3 feels like a completely different movie to me. Sure, you have high cinema like Dragon Wars D-War that switches to a different realm in the finale, but I prefer this movie took a page from the book of Big Trouble in Little China. That movie's final act is just in the basement of the bad guy's hotel. It doesn't transport us to a demon kingdom. We're keeping Dad's motivation of trying to resurrect his wife, but it won't be in the fantasy kingdom. I was unclear why the demon, totally thought it was Fin Fang Foom, it's apparently an unrelated demon who is an octopus in the comics, waited so long to whisper in the Mandarin's ear. Mandarin is apparently very long-lived, but it waits until this movie to plan its escape. Even if you say he had to wait for Mandarin to find a wife and settle down so it could use his love against him, there's still a good 20 years where the dragon could have been calling out to be freed. So we'll squeeze our MCU connection in here. The Dweller in Darkness was one of the Ancient One's many duties. Every so often, strengthen these defenses so this demon won't come out. Then she died, and her replacement was the new Sorcerer Supreme for about 3 minutes before he was snapped. Wong and Sarah Wolf tried to keep order in this realm, but Clea, in my fix, she comes to study with Steven after the first movie, was snapped as well, and Dormammu was like, yo, my niece, you guys were supposed to protect her. So they're busy keeping Dormammu from losing his cool, and the Dweller in Darkness slipped through the cracks. Literally, he's slipping through the cracks. Since one of Plan Chu's abilities is telepathy, thanks to the bracelets, he's much more susceptible to the dragon's call than the average bear. Oh, here's a great idea. In the shower of horse crap that was the Defenders, we found out there were dragon skeletons buried beneath New York City. The Hand wanted these bones so they could live longer. Completely idiotic. I already spent plenty of time on that, but one idea I suggested was the Hand wanted to summon an ancient demon to rule Earth because they believe humanity was making a mess of things. What if the Dweller in Darkness was one of these ancient entities the Hand tried to summon a long time ago, but they were thwarted either by the Chaste or by the Ancient One, and their method of trying to summon this creature, the rings, was confiscated from them. They wouldn't have referenced the Defenders, but not long after this movie, they were working the Netflix stuff, or at least multiversal versions of the Netflix stuff, into the main MCU. So by then, you could tie in the Dweller with Darkness with my version of the Defenders, or at least mention it in a sequel. How the rings made it to Shang's father isn't important. What is important is after the Ancient One's death and Strange's disappearance, this creature has gotten stronger, and with some whispers, he can trick Shang's dad into freeing him. If Daddy doesn't need a pendant, why did he kidnap Shang? Because as twisted and corrupt as Dad is, he still loves his son, and he wants him by his side when he brings his wife back. And maybe a very small part of him realizes his wife isn't calling to him, and he needs Shang to stop him so he doesn't doom the planet. A very small part of him. Shang's dad is going to release the Dweller in Darkness sealed beneath Hong Kong millennia ago. If he succeeds, millions will die, and that's just from the dragon getting up and stretching its legs. It could still destroy many more cities once freed. It would be important to show throughout the movie that, as much as Shang values the lives of innocents, every time he gets in a fight with one of his dad's goons, he revels in the ferocity of it. He's equal parts his mom with her kindness and his dad with his ruthlessness. By the time you get to the finale, Plan Chu sees he was wrong, but he's too far into summoning the demon to put a stop to it. But he sees Shang has the mental fortitude to wield the rings and stop the Dweller in Darkness from fully manifesting on Earth. With his dying breath, Dad sends the rings to Shang, and Shang is able to stop the demon from coming forth. For now. Shang has the rings, and while he isn't as powerful as his dad, he won't be using telepathy anytime soon, just magic martial arts, he can still hear the demon way off in the distance trying to come forth. Will Shang have the mental strength to ignore the demon, or does he have too much of his father in him? Shang takes over the 10 rings because if Shang doesn't grab the rings, someone else will, maybe his buddy from the Fight Club. So he tells himself, this isn't as bad as it looks. I'm going to redirect the 10 rings into a positive force, somehow. But Shang isn't a tactician. He started with no plan, just just kick butts and hope that works, and it basically did, but this will definitely be too much for him to swallow. In the sequel, his sister, like Shang, she escaped from her father's clutches when she was a teen, and she built up her own criminal empire from the ground up, but it's not enough. She wants to prove to herself she could have run the 10 rings to her father's satisfaction, even though he's not here anymore. She still feels that urge to do what he wouldn't allow. So that's your conflict in movie 2. From Agent Wu's perspective, Shang murdered his father and took over his operations. Shang and the audience know that's not true, but it leaves an ominous taste in our mouths nonetheless. We won't be getting a hint of Shang being buddies with the heroes left on Earth because they think he's an up-and-coming criminal. I feel like nothing quite deflates the stakes more than everyone knows each other, so if the threat is big enough, we can get 10,000 superheroes in here to clean house. So we prevent that by setting up Shang as a kind of villain protagonist. He's not villainous, but everyone thinks he is. And the next extinction level threat we get, if Shang doesn't get called in to help, that might bite our heroes in the butt. Maybe. But that's a thought for another time. This went on much longer than I thought it would. I hope you guys liked this one, and if you did, I do these things every so often, so come and check out the next one that I'll be doing later, and watch the other stuff that I do until then. In the meantime, have a good one. Catch you later.